It fills up pretty fast. Hello, everyone, and welcome. If you can hear me, please type in the chat, and then we can get started very quickly. And there's a bit of a delay, Kathy, so when I say it, it takes a few minutes for them to hear it and then get back. Lucia says no. Okay, can somebody else answer? I have to have multiple no's before it's a real no. Then we deal with one person as can be. Can anyone else hear me? Heather says yes. Okay, that's good. Okay, Lucia, oh, you can't hear me. Kathy.
Oh, I'm fine.
Not you, Kathy, not Kathy. Kathy Farron, can you please tell Lucia to hit the refresh button? Please type in and tell her to hit the refresh button, please. Thank you. There's a lot of Kathys around, too. Okay, so everyone can hear me great. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to do a short presentation on some of the research that Kathy sent me and a few things that I found on my own. And I'm not going to take too long to do it because I really want to give the majority of time to Kathy. And so she will explain what she does and how she helps people and make some, suggestions to us as to what we can do. So before I pull up my PowerPoint, I'm just going to introduce Kathy. So Kathy has been working as an integrative health coach since 2014. She's also a board certified holistic nutritionist with the National Association of Nutrition Professionals, which is the holistic nutrition professional in the US, for those of you who don't know that. And recognizing that many of her clients were doing everything right, yet still suffering from health issues, she realized that many home and work environments were contributing to illness. So she started seeing dramatic improvements in her own health after limiting radio frequency exposures, say from Wi-Fi or cell phones. She went and received the training and a certificate from the International Institute of Building Biology and Ecology. And this is what's given her the expertise to evaluate all areas in a person's life that may be contributing to illness. So welcome, Kathy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Very, very pleased to be here.
And just so you know, she's coming from us all the way from Boise, Idaho.
Where it snowed this morning, yeah.
Where it snowed this morning, and we're getting snow maybe tonight.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up my PowerPoint, which managed to disappear. So let me go and get my PowerPoint. We did test this before we started. So now I go back, and it should be there. There it is. Okay. So you can see my PowerPoint, correct, Kathy?
Yep.
Good. Okay, so we're going to be talking about EMFs, and I am going to discuss a little bit about what we know now as to how it affects the gut. I just want to give you this link. So this is where the replay will be posted. I will send out an email tomorrow with the replay, but if you go to this particular web page now, you can get the PDF slides for both mine and Kathy's presentation. She's also been very generous with handouts and other information, and it's all posted there. The quiz is posted there as well if you need CEU credits or practical hours or anything like that. I should remind you that if you want your name on the certificate, you have to have registered as a user and sign in, and the instructions are on the web page as well. Okay. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the 4 types of EMFs and the research that I'll go through briefly, the gut info, and then Kathy's going to take over with a little more clarification and the solutions. So there's 4 types of EMFs that we need to be concerned about. The first is electronic fields from house wiring. The second is magnetic fields that come primarily from point sources like your appliances or from wiring errors in your walls. Power lines could be from your neighbor's water pipes. That's a bit of a concern for me. I live in a link house complex, so our foundations are joined because of the water pipes in the basement. So that's very interesting. Radio frequencies from wireless devices. This is the one most of us know about: Wi-Fi, cell phones, wireless routers, baby monitors, appliances, smart meters, cell phone towers, and more. My niece was trying to convince me to buy more of this type of technology just today. I said no. Uh, and then you also have things like dirty electricity. So,
hey, Doreen, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you right here. I'm getting a bunch of comments that there's a bad echo going on. And people
can you mute your microphone for a sec and see if that gets rid of it?
Sure can. How's that? I'm muted.
Okay. No, we can't be because I can hear you. I'm sure you're muted now. Yeah, see there. Yeah. And I'll mute when you're speaking. Okay. And then if you need to talk to me, just unmute. Okay, so I don't know if that's helping because I can still hear it.
Yeah, I don't think that
Yeah, I don't think that helped. Let me see if I just want to close out this computer here. Sorry, everyone, just a sec. All right. Now I don't hear it. Wait, sorry, we skipped a slide. Go back. All right. So then we have the dirty electricity. That's when the wiring within your walls contains frequencies other than the normal 60 hertz of electrical current. And the normal sine wave ends up being altered, and there's surges of electricity that emanate into the living space. And this can come from electrical appliances such as your plasma TV or your computer, your utility meter, and of course, power lines. So those are the 4 basic types. And then there's different classes. So class 1 are devices are internal to the building and also controllable. So examples of that would be lamps and TVs and extension cords, because we can unplug them. You know, we can look and see, oh, they're plugged in. We can unplug them. We can turn them off. Unplugging is best. Class 2 sources are external to building and mainly refer to power lines and substations. And of course, we cannot control them except by being as far away from them as possible. And so we should try to avoid those as much as possible. And then class 3, the major source of electrical fields that's coming from building wires. These are internal, but not controllable, right? So you're all sitting in a room right now, and there's these wires running through your walls. Some examples are knob and tube wiring, which was commonly used prior to 1940. Wires in the wall, floor, or ceilings that provide power to outlets, and plastic jacketed household wiring that emits strong electric fields regardless if the devices are turned on or not. So if I have this correct, Kathy, that means we can unplug all our stuff, but we still have the outlets that have this type of electrical fields that could be possibly affecting us. All right. Now, there are meters that can measure this, and you need a different type to measure different types of things. So I believe this is one of the ones. There's a handout on the web page for this webinar, that web page I showed you. And Kathy has made a recommendation of 3 different types of meters that you could buy. They are made for the lay person. And this is a picture of one of them, and it measures more than one type. I think you said it measures 3 types, I believe. And so that is something you could get for yourself. They are available on Amazon if you can't find any other source for them, because I looked it up. And yeah, so this is something we can use. Obviously, the equipment that Kathy would use would be more sophisticated than this, but it could be something that could be used for you to assess your own environment to get some idea what's going on. And then I just put these slides in because once you, if you did get one of those little measuring devices, then you can use these little charts to decide whether it's an issue for you, because it says whether there's no concern all the way up to whether it should be an extreme concern. So you've got that for all 4 of the different types of energy. Okay. So in terms of the health research, it can be informative, but it's not really going to tell you what's happening with you, because unless you know what's happening in your environment, you don't know how much it can be affecting you. And it's just a matter of, we all live in different types of homes. We have different amounts of electricity. Our houses are of different age. But at least when you have some research, you know whether you should be concerned or not. And these charts are helpful with the amounts to help you assess risk. But you also have to weigh it against countering factors. So one of the things Kathy will be talking about later on is what you can do to protect yourself. And then we have to look at the individual's capacity for health issues and healing. And we're all different. So some people may be more affected, with these different possibilities for the health issues than other people. Most of the research studies are animal studies. There are some human studies, but most are animal studies. But again, it shows the propensity of what may happen in, certain cases as to how it can affect us. All right. So one study looked at exposure of rats to Wi-Fi EMFs, and I have to say that most of the research is on cell phones and Wi-Fi. They saw alterations in the gene expression of an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, which of course affects the breakdown of acetylcholine, which is the memory neurotransmitter. And this can be a factor in the development of neurodegenerative conditions. So, there have been some links with EMFs and cell phones and things like that to conditions like Alzheimer's, and this could be one of the reasons why. They did a study of humans, 47 people, and they measured their brain metabolism after direct exposure to cell phone. They measured it both when the phone was on and the phone was off. They found no difference in overall brain metabolism, but what they did find was an increase in brain glucose metabolism, which is another link to Alzheimer's and other neuro issues. And again, a lot of the research is on the brain because of cell phones. They looked at a study of, they looked at 13,159 children. And what they did is they had mothers fill out a questionnaire regarding cell phone use during pregnancy and after birth. And so they were looking at the prenatal and the postnatal. And what they found was it was associated with behavioral difficulties such as emotional issues and hyperactivity problems. And usually this would be showing up around the age of 7. So that was kind of interesting that, when we're looking at something like this, we're talking about babies and children in their formative years and, again, how their brain functions. And therefore, and remember, these kids aren't the ones on the cell phone. But they are in the atmosphere where the cell phones are and some of the Wi-Fis and things like that. So this is, I would say, of concern. Now, the researchers said there may also be confounding factors. So again, they didn't do an in-depth sort of look at what they're eating or, other things that might have offered protection, like high antioxidant foods and things like that. They didn't look at that, but it's still worth noting. Rat studies show that there's an increase in the blood-brain permeability, and of course that's related to Alzheimer's. It's also related to hemorrhaging neuropathic pain and other neurological conditions. And the permeability decreased as time passed after the exposure to EMFs. So again, that's the more we stay away from it, the better. So that shows that there's, some flexibility within the brain to improve as a result of not having the exposure as much as, people are having the exposure. Now, they did a stem cell research, but it was a murine, so, fish stem cell research. They were exposed to cell phone EMFs, and they found there was a decrease in the effect on limiting the development of the neurons. So again, affecting brain function. The good news is it did not affect the viability of the stem cells or cause them to die off. Now, in terms of cancer, studies with mice and rats show increase in the brain tumors when exposed to cell phones. That's a pretty commonly known thing now. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. Now, we are not rats and mice, so we do have to take that into consideration. But I guarantee you that over the course of a lifetime, we use the cell phone a lot more than the rats or the mice did. And observational studies looking at the people with brain tumors and their cell phone found some correlation, especially the longer the lifetime period of use. And again, when we think about children, you know, one of the things that parents are doing now is they're getting their kids cell phones sooner because it's a good way to keep track of them. And so people are using cell phones. You know, I've only been using a cell phone since 2006 over the course of my lifetime. But then look at children, right? So are we going to see more of a correlation as time goes on? Could be. The cancer relationship in EMFs is also connected to free radical damage. And this is what I found with a lot of the research. Is one of the things they were noticing was the oxidative stress that the EMFs across the board were causing with regard to different areas of the body. And of course, since they were primarily looking at the brain, a lot of it had to do with the brain. So a lot of free radical damage as a result of EMFs. And of course, the longer the exposure over time, the greater the free radical damage. This means that the longer the exposure, the more of a cancer correlation you're going to see. So depending on how long they do studies will determine how they're going to assess this correlation as we go. 20 plus year use would be considered a long time. So again, for most of us, depending how many years we've had a cell phone, and of course they haven't been around that long, but some of us are getting up there to the 20-year use for sure. Now, oxidative exposure was also the connection for the relationship between EMFs and heart disease. They also looked at the effect of high-risk pregnancies, so women who were, you know, at risk for having issues in their pregnancies and the effect of the growth of the embryo, and they saw a correlation. They also found a correlation between male sperm count and the exposure to EMFs, and the longer the exposure, the more correlation. And of course, one of the things they point out is how men carry their cell phones in their pockets, which is not a good thing. And there's also been multiple studies that found a correlation between decreased sperm motility and EMF exposure. Another couple of hormone relationships here. They had a human study, and the volunteers provided themselves for this hormonal analysis. So they didn't have a health condition or anything. They were just healthy people. And they followed them for 6 years. And their exposure to mobile phones and base stations. So not just the cell phones, but also the towers for the phones and how close they live to them, etc. And what they found was a significant decrease in ACTH. So that's the hormone that is the precursor to producing cortisol. They found a decrease in cortisol, thyroid hormones, prolactin for young females, and testosterone levels in males. So that's quite a bit of hormone interference just from cell phones and being near the towers. Now, I thought I would include the bigger picture here because there have been a number of environmental studies. And part of what we talk about on an ongoing basis is the you know, we encourage people to go outdoors. We appreciate how the trees in particular help our environment and help our health. They clean the air for us. They provide us with oxygen. They're very grounding. Going outdoors is very grounding. So we encourage people to go outdoors. But harming this environment has a long-term effect that can affect us health-wise as well. So in terms of the studies, they found that trees are being hurt if they are around the base station for the Wi-Fi towers or the cell phone towers or whatever. They have found and documented numerous health issues in birds. An increased death in tadpoles who were exposed within 140 meters of a tower. And bees exposed to EMF radiation show reduced motor activity. So they were looking at the worker bees in particular. So reduced motor activities and an increase in the stimulation of the bees' body function to fight the stress. So in other words, they were being activated to go into fight or flight, which again shortens their life, and they weren't producing as much honey. So very interesting, because there's been a lot of talk about how much we need the bees to keep, all the other plants functioning and how critical they are to the whole scheme of things. So, we don't want anything or we want to be aware of things that harm the bees. Okay, and other health issues showed correlation as well. Many are in comparison to increased exposure in the general environment and increase in, of course, the general health conditions. So in other words, they're looking at large groups of people and then seeing, how much cell phone use they have or exposure to other things, and then what health issues they have. They're not the very best studies, but they do, they are worth noting. And I think that it's a factor, and I think it's something that we have to consider. Now, in terms of the gut, so there was a few studies, and the one study looked at cultured strains. So most of these studies for the bacteria, they're taking the bacteria from, in this case, the skin, and they're putting it in a lab, or they're taking it from, specific, strains from a human and putting it in a lab. They're not actually looking at people. But anyway, they found that certain skin bacteria strains, when exposed to EMFs, showed a disruption in their growth, so they became irregular. Another study found that a 6-hour period of exposure after being exposed, the bacteria growth decreased and causes change to the bacteria. Another study found that the exposure to EMFs increased the rate of E. coli and listeria, which of course are what we call bad bacteria, and increased the strain resistance to antibiotics. So that was really interesting, because there was another study that found that L. plantarum and L. rhamnosus, which are two very beneficial bacteria, very commonly found in probiotics and of course in us as well, they suffered a reduction in the number of cells for each strain when exposed to EMFs. And so the reason I say this is interesting is because researchers have already found that there is a resilience to bad bacteria when exposed to antibiotics. They bounce back faster than good bacteria. So this is complicating that pattern, and we are concerned about antibiotic resistance of some of these more virulent strains. And if this is a contributing factor, then this is something we need to be aware of. And unlike this, and again, I have to state, they're taking the strains, putting them in a petri dish, and then exposing them to the EMFs. So they're not getting this because someone has been exposed to EMFs, because that would be impossible for them to test, right? It'd be very difficult. Now, again, what they link the damage to is free radicals. So in other words, free radicals are harming the bacteria in the gut. And they did the similar findings with the disruptions to the skin bacteria and increasing the risk of skin infection, again, linking it to free radicals. Now, we shouldn't be surprised by this, is because there's the process of irradiation of foods that is frequently done with foods coming over the border. So if they're going to the US from Canada, or from Canada to the US, or coming from Mexico and coming into the US, or from Mexico coming into Canada, wherever they're coming from, that's a different country. it's not all foods, but certain foods, and you can look it up in whatever country you're in. You can go to your government website and they'll tell you which ones are being irradiated. And they're doing it to prevent any organisms that don't belong in the environment that the food's being imported into to, have an ability to thrive here. So we know that this is the same. So irradiation just means radiating something. The reason they call it irradiation is the substance is irradiated, but what they're getting is radiation. And so we already know that it can kill bacteria. All right, so when I was thinking about EMFs and the gut, there was two possibilities that I was considering. One was, do the EMFs affect the gut directly only, and in turn alter the microbes? And that's what we're seeing with regard to the health issues associated with EMFs. So it's because we know that when you damage the gut, it links to all kinds of health conditions, right? Or do the EMFs cause gut microbe changes and also affect other parts of the body directly, and both are contributing to client issues? So which do you think it is? Type in the chat, which do you think it is? Do you think they're affecting the gut and therefore then affecting the health of the person in various areas of the body, since we're finding, a link to so many different conditions in EMFs? Or do you think they're affecting the gut and affecting directly certain areas of the body? What do you think it is? Okay, we got 3 votes for 2, 4 for 2. Oh, we're all going for 2. Everybody's saying 2. Okay, it's the second one. Excellent. Okay. All right. Well, you're right. Because here's a picture. So this is that study I was telling you about, brain glucose metabolism. This is a picture from one of the brain scans that they did. So you can see what areas are lit up when the cell phone is on, and you can see what areas of the brain are lit up when the cell phone is off. So we are being affected directly by it with, whatever body parts are being exposed, plus it's also harming our bacteria. And this is a twofold problem, because obviously bacteria has a protective nature for us, as well as, if you don't have the right composition, you're going to be prone to more health conditions. All right. So I did find two studies actually on kombucha. And one was a rat study, and it showed that the kombucha offered protection against oxidative damage to the liver, kidneys when exposed to irradiation. And again, this was EMF irradiation, not regular irradiation. This was an EMF study. And then another study, again, looking at EMFs, found a similar result for heart and lung protection. So our bacteria is important in this scenario to help protect us. Now, I looked for other fermented foods to see if there were any studies for them, but there weren't, not for EMFs, but there were lots that showed that kefir, yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi offered protection against oxidative damage. So they haven't been studied with regard to EMFs, but I'm sure if they were, they would find a similar result. And then we know that the bacteria protects against oxidative stress. And since there was a couple of other things that they have found with EMFs in the gut, that they found that it's linked to altering the gap junction function, which of course increases inflammatory markers. And the gut bacteria play a role in lowering the inflammatory response and protecting the lining. And so other strategies to protect the gut lining and support gut bacteria should be done routinely to help protect against EMF effects. Because of how the gut bacteria protects us, it's one of the things that you should consider when trying to help people protect themselves from the EMFs. Okay, so that's the end of my part of the presentation. And I'm going to come out of screen share. Um, okay, there we go. And now, Kathy, if you want to call up your PowerPoint.
Yep, and I just turned the microphone on, so we might hear that echo again. I don't know.
I'll turn mine off.
Okay. Can you see my slides here? Well, I asked you, and I can't hear you. So.
Yes, I can see your slides.
My slides look fine? Okay,
yes.
Great. I can't see the chat, so.
Okay.
Wonderful. So, thank you, Lorraine, for breaking down the science for us. And I just want to make a quick note on the science. Because, you know, as nutrition professionals, this is kind of our bread and butter. We need to look at the science to get good quality data and make sure that, you know, we understand our approaches and we understand the mechanisms of action and everything that's happening. But with the EMFs, I just want to make a note that though we need to look at the science, it doesn't show us the full picture necessarily, because we're not doing data in realistic situations. So we're not really testing people for this 24/7 exposure. You know, you can't really be in a lab and test for somebody's fitness device and their Wi-Fi and their cell phone. And, you know, the fact that it's continuous 24/7. So while, you know, we need to look at the science, I think that the issue is much bigger than the science is able to capture right now. So I just wanted to mention that. And also, you know, a lot of the research is done on quote unquote healthy people. And when clients are coming to us and they're, you know, they have Lyme and Hashimoto's and, you know, heavy metals, etc., you know, we're adding a very large, impactful exposure. So just wanted to mention that real quick. And the other piece of that is just anecdotal evidence. You know, I have many clients who say, you know, every time my smart meter goes off, it's like I feel like I'm stabbed. And that's not really easy to, you know, how are we going to do a scientific study on that? It's difficult. So when you're working with clients, I just want to mention, you know, think about the symptoms that they're telling you, because some of these, you know, insomnia, we're not really studying EMS for insomnia. We're studying a billion other reasons. So pay attention to your client's symptoms, because that's going to give you a lot of information. And then I just wanted to mention my story really quickly and how I got into the field. I had really bad tinnitus for about 10 years, just in my left ear. And I had insomnia and major sleep issues. And when I stopped using a cell phone, because I was trying to understand, you know, what my tinnitus was about, I stopped using a cell phone. And within about 2 to 3 days, my tinnitus was totally gone. And that hadn't happened in over 10 years. And then that really, you know, that caught my attention. So I kind of went down this rabbit hole and started to piece together all these other symptoms I was having to the EMF exposure. And then here I am, you know, having been trained as a building biologist, because it was such a huge impact to me. And I felt like, okay, if I'm going to help my clients with all their health symptoms, but they're going home and they're sleeping with the router underneath their bed, which I've seen many times, that's not a good situation. So, you know, just kind of addressing the entire person and all of the variables. So like Lorraine mentioned earlier, when you have clients that you're working with, you know, if somebody comes to you and they're like, oh, I've gained a few pounds and, you know, I just kind of want to shed a little weight, but otherwise I feel great, they're not the person that I'm going to, you know, scream EMFs. It's not going to scream EMFs to me right away. However, I would still mention that, but the person that comes to you and says, I can't get out of bed, I don't have any energy, I have no libido, I get headaches all the time, you know, the more symptoms, the more you need to think about this EMF exposure. Because what I've seen over and over with my clients is the more symptoms they have, the better results you'll get from eliminating this EMF exposure. Because a lot of it really is like that rain barrel analogy. You know, when your rain barrel is full, you add one more thing on top of it, the EMFs, sometimes that's the trigger, and that's where we see some of the most hypersensitive patients or clients, as we call it, electrohypersensitivity. So just something else to keep in mind. Okay, but what you really want to hear about is mitigation. So how do we protect ourselves? So I'm going to go through each of the 4 frequencies and just break it down, because each frequency is going to have different remediations. So the radio frequency, this is all of our communication devices. Anything that's wireless is going to have the radio frequencies. And what do we do about that? Well, we reduce our usage. And this is a really, really difficult point, because people don't want to reduce their usage. People don't want to turn their phones off. People don't want to put their phones down for anything. People tell me all the time, well, I have to have my phone on 24/7 because my boss might call or my kids might call. And, you know, I understand that there are circumstances where we need to be reached, but landlines still work, right? I mean, there are alternatives. So I'm gonna, you know, kind of go through each of these. So yeah, using a corded landline, and I'm saying corded because if you have a landline but you're using a cordless phone, the cordless phones almost are worse than a cell phone. They're just as bad. It's like having kind of a little mini cell tower right in your house. So an old school corded landline, and I know people think this is absurd when I make this recommendation, but a lot of us work in offices and we probably have a corded landline and we don't think anything of it when we're in our office. So it's totally doable. And when you get used to it, it's really not that big of a deal. So the other thing for your cell phone is to keep it in airplane mode as much as possible. So when you're in airplane mode and the Bluetooth is also off, you can't get and receive calls, but you'll still be able to check your messages. You'll still be able to use your apps. You can still use it as an alarm clock, all of these things. But most of us don't need to be accessible 24/7, nor should we. You know, as healthcare professionals, I think that we need to be aware and promoting a healthy work-life balance, so that we shouldn't be able to be reached 24/7. It's an unnatural thing, unnatural expectation maybe that we've come to grow accustomed to. But I challenge everybody to kind of take a step back from that and unplug whenever we can. So for the Wi-Fi, use an Ethernet cable. It's pretty easy. Your connection will be safer. It will be quicker. And it's, if you're working on a laptop all day and you have an office setting, it's really not that difficult. You don't need to carry it around with you all over the house. So plugging in via Ethernet, it's a pretty easy thing to do. And you can buy devices where you could plug in several cords into one device. So that, if you have 5 people in the house that need internet connection, you can do that while being plugged in via Ethernet. So those right there are probably going to be the biggest reduction in exposure if you do these things, because we're all connected to our phones and our Wi-Fi pretty much all the time. So if you eliminate those, you're dropping your exposure quite a bit. So also, in your home, you got to think about like all these smart devices. So everybody's getting these smart speakers now. I was just home for Christmas, and everyone in my family got a smart speaker. And they were trying to hide it from me because they know what I do for a living, but they love them, so they were giving them as gifts. They really aren't that necessary. I would just say, limit those devices because they're just not really very important in your life, and they give off quite a big amount of radio frequency. Fitness tracking devices, another one that you're putting it on your body, and that's something that I always find kind of comical, because we're using a health device that is emitting radiation on our body. So, you know, it's kind of a contradiction, but I would just, you know, be cautious about those and try to minimize the use of those as well. And if you can't cover up your Wi-Fi and, you know, you're going to get, you know, some angry arguments from your family members about covering up, you know, the smart speaker and all this, at a minimum, you can get a cover, like a cloth. They make just a cloth that looks just like cotton. It has some silver woven through it. And you can just drape that over your Wi-Fi router. You can drape it over a speaker. You'll still get the connectivity, but it will reduce your exposure by quite a lot. I do have a link to some of that cloth on my website if you want to check that out. It'll just take you to another website where they sell it, but it can be pretty helpful. All right. There we go. So that's radio frequencies, and then we've got electric fields. So I really like to show this picture because this gives you a good idea of what's going on behind your wall. And so imagine this is your bedroom, and you've got your, you know, your bed would be right against this wall, and where is your head? You know, right down here where there's wires going directly across the wall. And so, you know, there are electrons and voltage traveling through these wires, and they don't stay in the wires. Electrons aren't going to just behave themselves and stay in the wires. They come out into your living space, you know, 6, 8 feet sometimes. So I always make the recommendation for people to pull their bed out from the wall. And I'll get into this a little bit more, but, you know, this is what's happening behind your bed usually, and we're not even thinking anything of it. I mean, why would we? So I do want to, you know, make a quick note that having an assessment done by a certified building biologist is always the best option, because when you buy a layperson's meter, those are great, but you really got to learn how to use it. It can be kind of cumbersome and confusing. Once you learn how to use it, awesome. You know, you've got a great sense of self-empowerment there. But getting like a base level from a building biologist is a good idea because this isn't necessarily a DIY situation. You want to make sure you're doing things right. You know, I just like to make that recommendation because sometimes people can make things worse, and I'll explain that in a minute. So another thing that you can do besides pulling your bed out from the wall, which is great, and I usually recommend at least 1 foot or 2, you can turn off the breakers. So I turn off the breakers every night before I go to bed, to almost the entire house except maybe the refrigerator and the furnace. So turning off the breaker to the bedroom is great because then you're de-energizing all of those wires that are running kind of behind your head. But I do want to mention, if you've got 2 circuits in this room here and you turn off one circuit, that other circuit, that field might actually go up, because when you've got 2 circuits, they cancel each other out. So that's why I say, you know, turn off your breakers, but you need to know what happens before you do that. So, and that could be, you know, you could do this yourself with one of these meters, checking to see what your electric fields are. Turn off the breaker. Does it go up? Okay, then I have to turn off that circuit as well. Or did it go down? Great, I can keep my breaker off in the bedroom. Another really easy thing to do along those lines is to install a kill switch. And that's something your electrician would do. They basically just, right next to the light switch in the bedroom, they'll install another one. It just looks like a normal light switch, and it will actually kill the whole circuit into the bedroom. So when you go to bed at night, you don't have to go down to the breaker box and turn the breaker off. You can just hit that switch and it turns the breaker off right there when you're ready for bed. And it's really easy. You know, you have to pay for the electrician's time, but it takes about 10 minutes. So that's a great thing to do. One of the easiest things to do, just unplug everything. If you're not using it, there's no reason for it to be plugged in. So this is going to be especially impactful when we're talking about your bedside lamps. You know, when you're sleeping and you've got voltage coming into the lamp right next to your head, that's going to emanate, you know, very close to your head and your body. So just unplug it. That's a great thing to do. And having your alarm clock. Also, the alarm clock gives off a pretty big field. So having an alarm clock on the other side of the room, or using a battery-powered alarm clock is a great thing to do too. And so there was a question in the chats earlier about CPAPs, so I wanted to mention that here. I have not personally tested a CPAP. However, if it's plugged in, it's getting voltage coming up to it, and that's going to emanate out a little bit. So I can't say for certain what the levels are on those. You know, I would want to test it, and there's different machines, so they're all going to be different, but it will have some electric fields, but you know, I don't really want to say, oh, they're horrible or they're not so bad without having tested it first. But the key here is you keep it as far from the body as possible, and that's going to reduce your exposure. So distance is key in all of this. Then we've got magnetic fields, and I know this is kind of a funny picture, but I was just struck by how she's leaning against the dryer, and if that was on, that is going to give a massive magnetic field. And you know, and this picture struck me because we all do this, right? We sit in front of our dishwasher while it's running and have a conversation for 20 minutes and don't even think about it. Or we lean up against the refrigerator and don't even think about it. And those larger appliances will have big, really big magnetic fields. So anything in your house that has a motor, that has variable speeds, like a blender, your appliances, electric razors, electric toothbrushes, these are all going to be sources of these magnetic fields. So again, distance is key. So we want to keep our distance as much as we can. Just, you know, kind of be aware of not standing in front of your large appliances for long periods of time. The breaker panel in your home will have a big magnetic field. So usually breaker panels are outside or out in the garage, and that's great. But if it is right next to a bedroom, that needs to be remediated. Or if it's in the bedroom, I've seen that. That's something that I would want to get checked out, because you want distance. You know, do not have your bed on the other side of the breaker panel, for example. For light bulbs, old school incandescent light bulbs are great, even candles. So avoid CFLs and LEDs. Use just the old school incandescent light bulbs. They are going to be the best. If you use a space heater, keep it as far from you as possible. They're one of the biggest sources that I find. Do not ever have that right by your feet. They are one of the worst offenders by far. Your battery powered alarm clock, I mentioned that. You know, put your alarm clock on the other side of your room. They're also extremely high. You wouldn't think it, but they are. So don't have an alarm clock right next to your head. Not a good idea. And then if you're on a laptop all day, instead of having your hands right over the laptop where the magnetic field is very high, get an external keyboard and mouse, so then you can have just a little bit of distance from your computer. Now, I realize I'm going through all of this very quickly, and I apologize. This is a huge topic, but I just want to make sure that I have time for questions. So, you know, sorry about the rush. So then we've got microsurge electrical pollution. And this is a difficult topic for people to grasp their minds around, but it is very impactful. In fact, for a lot of my clients, this is one of the most biologically impactful, or they get the most symptoms from this. So what this is, you know, microsurge electrical pollution or dirty electricity. Our electricity in the U.S. works on 60 hertz, and we have a sine wave. And so our electricity goes in this really nice, clean sine wave, 60 cycles a minute. And when we plug stuff in to our outlets, that changes the frequencies, and then we get these microsurges. And it's kind of like these pulses, or people will say it's like these stabs. So these pulses are emanating into our living space. So it's pretty significant for EHS people, like I mentioned. Where does it come from? All these beautiful things that we plug into our power lines. So plasma TVs have a lot, pool pumps, solar panels. Solar panels are huge. If you have a client that is very, one of your most challenging clients, very sick, nothing's working, ask them if they have solar panels. This is often one of the biggest missing pieces to helping people heal, because the solar panels give so much dirty electricity. It really impedes healing for a lot of people. So what do you do about this? Well, if you have any of these devices, unplug them. That's the first thing to do. The other thing is that they make these filters, these dirty electricity filters, which you can use throughout the house. And they're great. They work really well. This is another area, though, where you want to make sure that you have a building biologist assess, because if you've got wiring errors or something going on in your house and you plug these in, it's going to make the situation bigger. So just be aware of that. They work great, but you need to know what the situation is in your house already. And then lastly, lifestyle. Lifestyle is really important. We saw that oxidative stress is a big method of some of the symptoms that we get from EMFs. So a really great antioxidant diet, mitigating stress, dealing with the heavy metals and infections. What I find the people that are most sensitive are people who have a lot of heavy metals and a lot of infections. So again, the sicker your clients, the more this is going to help them. And then lastly, I wanted to mention this course. I don't have any affiliation with Nick Pineau. He's the author of this book. But he does have a course specifically for practitioners that takes you, I think it's a 5-week course. I haven't been through it yet, but it takes, I have many colleagues that have, and it's very good from what I've heard. But it deals more with how to help your clients on, a nutritional level and through medical testing and that kind of stuff. So he's opening up again, I believe, in April. Anybody can email me if you want more information about that. And that is about it. So I'm going to stop sharing. Did it work?
Still sharing, but that's okay if it stays there. Oh, there you are. Okay, you got lots of questions here.
Yeah, I bet.
All right, so the first one is, does a building biologist know about mold?
Yes, good question. So a building biologist can get training for EMFs or air quality or both. So some of us do, some of us do not. I got training in both of those, but there are building biologists that just do the EMF.
Somebody asked about what to do with having a washroom light on at night.
Oh, for the bathroom.
For the bathroom.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking washroom, I was thinking washer and dryer. So what I like to do is, well, there's two considerations here. There's the blue light consideration. I don't ever like to have light at night because, it'll suppress your melatonin. So I wear these beautiful glasses, or, these other glasses. If you have to have a light on and you can use like a battery powered light, like a tap light or something like that, that just works on the battery, then you don't have to have the breakers on in that room, and you can have that light turned off, is what I would recommend.
Okay, sorry, I'm writing down the questions because they keep coming in so fast. Okay, so what should a person do if they live in a condo and the EMS are coming from their neighbors? Now, first of all, condo walls are solid concrete. Does that help in any way?
It does. Yep, it will shield that a little bit. That's a tricky question. So there's a number of things to consider. First, you clean up your own environment because, again, distance is key. The second thing to do is, we don't know what's going on in the neighbor's apartment. So if you are able to have a discussion with them about maybe they will unplug their router at night, or maybe they will put the router on the other side of the building. Or maybe you can buy them a metal box to put their router in. You know, a lot of times neighbors are open to this, or maybe you just make sure that you sleep on the opposite side of the room as possible. So it's just distance. Sometimes our neighbors are totally open to having these discussions. Sometimes they're not, but it's definitely worth the try.
You were talking a little bit about CPAP machines. What about pacemakers?
Yeah, so you know, pacemakers. There have been some concern that a cell phone use next to a pacemaker will interfere with the EMI, electromagnetic interference. The studies on that, again, are kind of all over the place, but it makes sense to me from what I know in how electricity works that if somebody has a pacemaker, I want them to reduce their EMF exposure across the board.
And when you're talking about the laptop and putting in a keyboard and a mouse, is it okay to have a wireless keyboard?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, wired. I mean, I wish if you could see my setup right now. I mean, here's my wires, right? But
I'm wired in too.
yeah.
What should someone do if they already have installed solar panels?
Great question. So there are some mitigation strategies, and this would be something you would talk with an EMF specialist about or a building biologist, but you can get some inline filters. Basically, you're going to filter the dirty electricity at the panel. It's a little bit complicated. You really have to have someone that knows what they're doing, but you're going to buy a somewhat expensive filter and install that right at the panel, and that's going to help to mitigate some of that conversion that's happening with the solar panels.
Is a 5G network worse?
Okay, so quick clarification. When you open your computer and you turn on the Wi-Fi, and you might see that you have just your normal connection and then you have 5G, what that stands for is 5 gigahertz. So our Wi-Fi works on 2.4 gigahertz and it works on 5 gigahertz because we had to open up this new level of frequency because we're running out of bandwidth. So if that's what you're referring to, instead of the 5G that's coming to a neighborhood soon near you, the 2.4, I've heard that 2.4 has more biological impact than 5 gigahertz, but it's really difficult to say. I mean, when I test them with, my meters that look like a Ghostbusters meter, they max out the meter all the time. So neither is good.
What about a space heater? The bathroom is very cold without heating it up the room first.
Yeah, sure. So I'll have a lot of clients do that. They turn them on, they heat up the room, and then they climb into bed and unplug it, and that's fine. Or you just want to keep your distance. If you have to have it in the bathroom and you use the bathroom once at night, no big deal. Just don't keep it right next to you. Several at least.
And do dryers put off less EMFs if they're on fluff?
I don't know. I would have to test that. I mean, the thing about appliances is they're all different. And so I'll test one dryer and it will be very low EMF. I'll test another one and it's off the charts. So it's really hard to make blanket recommendations or analysis of a dryer in general. But it might. I don't know.
Okay. Is there any connection between EMFs and mold?
That's a good question. Well, what I find is, again, with the people who have the most symptoms are also people that are highly sensitive to mold. So what I find a lot of times is someone is electrically hypersensitive and they have mold exposure or they've dealt with mold exposure in the past. But whether or not there's a connection in the building, not really.
And that could have a gut connection too, because a lot of people who are sensitive to mold have gut problems, and that comes back to the idea that the gut is offering some protection.
Right.
Right. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, what have you heard? Oh, wait, I think you might have answered this. What have you heard about the new 5G cell towers and phones coming soon? All right. So I think you answered that with the previous question. So one person is asking, so battery power is okay?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I have clients that are so extremely sensitive that even batteries bother them. They can't even wear a watch because the watch will stop. That happens often. I know it's amazing. But for most of us who are generally healthy and kind of have, you know, a good foundation going, it's not going to be that big of a deal.
All right, and then the next question is, they're just firing them. What is if my bedroom is in the basement with the furnace breaker box, even though there is a sliding door divider? You got them worried. This is what you've done. You've got
I
them
know,
worried.
I know. Every time I teach class, people walk away and they have their heads down and they're all depressed. Yeah, it can be a scary topic, but a door, if the question is the door going to provide any blocking? No. Magnetic fields go through anything. There are shielding materials that you can get from magnetic fields, but they're extremely expensive and not very effective. So the best situation is to move your bed as far as possible from that breaker panel. And they drop off within a couple feet. So I just don't want, you know, the breaker panel to be here and your bed to be here. You want it several feet away.
B is just making a note here that some condos have wood structure, not necessarily concrete. Fresca's asking, if you can't turn off Wi-Fi, how far do you want to be sleeping from it?
I mean, as far as possible. And that's where I should have grabbed some cloth here, but you know, if you just, this is a shielding cloth right here. It's just like it's cotton. And if you can't turn it off, just wrap it in this. Or if it's in the neighbors, just, you know, as far as you can get, basically.
I think someone also had a question earlier, is how far should the cell phone be away from you?
Well, I mean, with my meters, I can pick up cell phones, I mean, across the whole neighborhood. It's, you know, that doesn't mean that it has a huge impact on you, but again, kind of as far away as possible. I mean, if it's in the vicinity that you can talk on it, you're getting a large frequency. So, you know, I would never put it here. It says in your manual, don't put it next to your head. So, you know, as far as is reasonable, you can also, I have a safe sleeve, a link to a safe sleeve on my website, which is like a shielding sleeve that you put your phone in, and you can make calls and talk through the sleeve. It's not foolproof. You still get some exposure, but it drops it down, you know, 50, 60%. So it's not bad.
Yeah, I never use my cell phone to my ear. It's always on speaker.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Okay, so Lizianne is asking, what do you think of EMF protection for mobile? Okay, so I think that was what you were talking about, Defender shields.
Safe sleeve.
Safe sleeve?
Defender shields are another. There's many companies that make these.
Okay, so Jacqueline's asking, is there bedding that you can put on your bed to block some penetration?
Yeah,
what about grounding sheets?
Mm-hmm. So grounding sheets and grounding pads need to be used with caution, because in the US, we send all of our electricity back through the earth. So there will be current on the earth around your house, unfortunately. So sometimes when you use these grounding pads, you're basically grounding yourself into more current. And so what we typically say is, you know, we don't recommend them, but if you use them and you feel great, fine, you know, use it then. I mean, it's a difficult situation to really assess, but you just have to exercise caution with that. And I don't recommend that everybody run out and buy one for that reason. You can, if you have a lot of radio frequency, you can get a canopy. So it's, you know, similar kind of cloth, but it has more breathability. And you buy a whole canopy that goes over your bed. You just got to, you know, again, you got to make sure that you don't have a lot of electric fields in the room, because those will couple onto the shielding fabric and make the situation worse. So if you have to ground it and you have to do it properly, but they do exist. It can be done.
And Fresca's asking, how much is that Ghostbuster EMF detector you were holding?
So this is a gigahertz meter. This is one meter that I have. It was about $2,000, and I've got 3 similar devices to these, plus a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff.
The ones that she has recommended, and you can find that in the handout, one of the handouts that is posted on the webpage. There was one that was 168 US, which worked out to be 225 Canadian on Amazon, and the others were around 199 US, I believe.
Yeah, the ones that I have listed on my website are from about 160 to 200-ish.
Yeah.
US.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions? This was a lot. This was jam-packed.
Yeah. Sorry that we only had an hour, but anybody can contact me on my website if you have any questions. I'm happy to discuss any of this further. I know this is a big topic, and my interest is helping you guys and helping your clients. So don't hesitate to contact me at all.
And I will post that on the webpage so that you can easily find her, as well as I'll send out the link to the webpage tomorrow in an email, so that in case you don't know where the webpage is, if you haven't seen the webpage where all the webinars are hosted, then you'll be able to find it. Okay, so I think that was a lot of questions. I think that's the most questions we've ever had asked before.
It's a rare topic. We don't learn about it in nutrition class, right?
No, and again, I think there's still much more to learn.
Right.
But I think we're getting a little carried away with the technology. I mean, if you could see what I'm surrounded with right now, you'd have a cow. I have 2 computers, a TV, right? Because I'm doing the renovations.
Mm-hmm.
A little fridge, a little freezer.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a bunch of electrical extension cord, and
that's what most of us do.
Yeah. And I've actually got, so this side of the room is in one circuit, and this one is using an extension cord into another circuit because I keep blowing a fuse. And so this was not the best place for me to be, and my cell phone's right here beside me, and it's on. I should have turned it off, right? I'm not on the phone.
Yeah, put it on airplane mode.
Right. Calls. Oh, there was another question about when it's on airplane mode, and what was the other thing you said?
Bluetooth.
Bluetooth is off. Can you see the messages when they come in?
No.
No. So that's only if people.
So you can't, and that's kind of a bummer. So I mean, mine's on airplane mode, and I turn it on once or twice a day just to check messages. And you could do that, more often. But no, you won't know if you get a message when it's in airplane mode.
Okay, because I just turn mine off, and I get the messages when I turn it back on. So. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. You were an enthusiastic audience as always. And I really want to thank Kathy for doing this for us. This was amazing. It really is nice to hear from people who actually do the work and have the experience, because you have much more to contribute than us just reading about it, on a website or somebody's book or something like that, right? You've got the hands-on experience. So this was really, really helpful. Okay, so nobody's saying anything. They got really quiet.
I see a lot of things coming through.
I still didn't see they're still there. They're still there. Oh, wait, they're way up there. Oh, yeah, that's because I didn't move the thing. Oh, Nikki is saying Tesla cars are shielded, but most other electric or hybrids are not. That's a really interesting point, Nikki, because I heard on the news yesterday that, not yesterday, but a week ago, that Canada's getting crap from other countries because we're not as prepared for the cars that drive themselves, that we don't have enough electrical infrastructure to do the hands-free cars. And I'm like, yay! Let's stay not there. I never thought I'd be wanting to keep petrochemicals, But we could do other cleaner forms of energy. We don't have to do petrochemicals. We could have kept the combustion engine and just go to more clean sources, right? But anyway. Jonah's saying that the self-driving cars are using 5Gs.
So yeah, if we're talking about 5G, which is the 5th generation of technology, because right now, our phones are on 4G. So the 5G, the other 5G that's coming to a town near you very soon, is a little scary. And the tests that they've done have not worked out very well. It's killed a lot of wildlife. It's caused some pretty significant health issues for people. However, it's still being tested, and we don't know what frequencies they're going to end up using. So there's a lot of unknowns about it. So, before we all panic about it, we don't even know what it's going to be yet.
Susan is saying she heard fiber optics is superior to wireless.
Well, yes. I mean, if any time that you're wired, the connection is better because it doesn't have to travel through the air. It's a direct connection through wires. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
And Nikki says there's more concern about 5G that's being studied and debated in Europe. So I guess they're doing some research there. So that's good.
Yeah, it's a big deal all over the world. Yeah.
Lizanne has posted I should grab that. She's posted a link to Nick Pinault's podcast on EMF. Mm-hmm. So yep. I will put that in onto the page as well. Fresca's asking, see, they weren't finished. I wonder if the shielding on microwave doors could be used, where that jumped, elsewhere to protect against EMFs.
The shielding that's used on, well, sure. I mean, it's essentially some kind of metal mesh, which is what we use to shield against, radio frequencies. So, and you can buy that. It's, you can buy stuff like that. Even the wire screens for your windows actually will shield against radio frequencies.
Debbie's saying, what if you cannot turn off or plug out all your appliances every night, such as microwave, range, digital cable box?
Yeah, right. And not everybody is going to do that. I mean, most people aren't going to unplug the refrigerator, and that's fine. So this would be where you would want a meter, or you want a professional to help you assess what the best combination is. So if you can just do your bedroom and the circuits that near the bedroom, great. I mean, that's going to be a big deal. And if the microwave, I mean, we should be able to unplug that at night, right? We're not using it at night. And then again, that's, the cloth. If you've got the cable box or the Wi-Fi, just throw a cloth on it.
Do those little sticks on the devices for your cell phones actually work to block EMFs?
Generally, we don't recommend them because that's kind of, they might. We don't have any way of testing them, right? Because they don't block anything. What they claim is that they change the frequencies, or they make the frequencies more harmonious. And we don't have any way to test that with a meter. So we can't say, and a lot of hypersensitive people will use them and say, oh, I feel great, or oh, that was a total waste of money. So, it's your choice if you want to throw money at that. You can, and you can see, and if it helps you, great. But as a general rule, we don't recommend them.
And are EMFs related to dental fillings?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you have metal in your mouth, which is conductive, and you've got conductive fields happening. I mean, when I'm working with people with some of the biggest symptoms, it's, mercury and lead issues. Yeah, for sure.
But the new ones don't. If you've had your mercury fillings removed, then
right. Yeah.
And then Jenna's saying turning off breakers is easier than unplugging everything. I really like the idea of that kill switch.
Yes, the kill switch is great. It's such an easy thing. And I mean, you're going to bed and you just flip the switch and you're done.
And then Nikki is also making sorry, I'm going to copy that one too. She's got saying something about Josh DeSole-Beaulieu, info at takebackyourpower.net.
Yep, that great. I think I mentioned that to you before, Lorraine, but maybe it didn't make my handout. Yes, Take Back Your Power by Josh DeSole. It's excellent documentary that I think he has for free right now. So everybody should go watch that. It's really well done.
Okay, I'm going to copy that one. Where's the copy? There's the copy. Okay. Is live streaming Wi-Fi or using Netflix, for example, worse than downloading something and then watching it?
It'd be great to download it first and then watch it. So then you can download it, put it on your computer or whatever, and then disable the Wi-Fi and then watch it that way. That's a great way to do it.
And then Nikki's just making the comment that your teeth metal fillings are like antennae.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm glad you could attend, and I was sending this out. And again, thank you, Kathy. So have a good evening every night. Have a good evening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.